What's good, y'all? Anderson Emerald back here, exiting the stadium, heading back. But let's talk about these 200s. The men's 200 meters heats just finished off today at the 2025 World Championships. Check out all the interviews was able to capture for Citius Mag with Kenny B, with Noah Lyles, with we got Let's See Let the Boho, we got Bryan Levell, we got the whole crew, Christopher Taylor. So definitely tap in and check that out. But let's dive in and talk about the 200 meters, because this was the bounce back after the 100 meters for a few guys like Noah Lyles, like Kenny Bednarek, like Let's See Let the Boho, who false started. And this is also the opening for a few other guys like Bryan Levell, like Christopher Taylor, like, some of those guys. So we got some interesting dynamics at play based on the guys that are going to be competing here. Now, first off, I think the biggest thing here was Bryan Levell, 19.84 seconds. And if I get any of these times wrong, definitely fact check me in the comments, because I'm kind of doing this off the top as I am heading back. But Bryan Levell, 19.84 seconds. And in his post-race interview, he said he felt relaxed. He said he felt comfortable. He said that he didn't even expect that time to come up. But he also is not focused on time, of course. He just wants to qualify through, and get into the next couple rounds. Now, I'm very excited. Obviously, he has been the rare find of the 2025 season, really 2024, but, 2025 is when most people really, got aware of Bryan Levell. And I think this at least bodes well to further the argument that A, he is no fluke in any capacity, right? That 19.69 was not a one-off. The 19.7 back in Racers Grand Prix, that was not, fluke in any capacity. And he is more than capable of running fast. Now, the big question is, how will he do when he progresses through the rounds? How will he translate this into the semifinals? How will he potentially translate this into the finals? Because remember, this is only the heats. We're only talking about the heats, right? Let's not get too fooled or too excited with a singular time in the heats. We got to make sure that everything translates into the final. So I'm very excited for Bryan Levell to see how he does progress. I also asked him in the interview what he thought about the 19.69 and if he was surprised with that race in Hungary. And he said, yeah, he was kind of surprised by the time, but, he has been working in practice and training to make sure that he is, trying to be the best athlete that he can be. And listen, it's translating on the track. So shout out to Bryan Levell, shout out to Sneaky Osborne, his coach. I know Jamaicans love, to shout out the coaches, which they've been doing some great work. So also after that, well, not after that, just kind of going by the names, we had Noah Lyles, comfortably won his heat as well. Spoke to him afterwards. He had a little mentorship situation, him and Andre DeGrasse, with Christopher Taylor, who finished, he qualified into the next round. He ran a personal best of 20.2 seconds. And Noah Lyles was talking about, kind of giving advice to Christopher Taylor, talking about how he can, how he can relax himself, while he's at these championships, while he's in the call room, all those kind of things, because Christopher Taylor is still a relatively young, rising athlete. Obviously, he's been young in previous years where he was coming out of high school champs and all that, but, he has a bright future. Again, he gets a personal best here, Christopher Taylor. It's going to be tough to see how he does progress into the final, right? That's a whole different discussion, but shout out to Chris Taylor. Noah Lyles, I still think he's, the overall favorite, and he said that he feels very comfortable coming off the 100 meters going into the 200, and this is no different than any other championships where he's doubled. Now, he said he obviously feels better than last year, because last year he literally had COVID, but he is now feeling good going into the champ, so it'll be exciting to see how he does progress. Shout out to Kenny B. She dominated his heat. Nothing too fast by any means, but dominated his heat, and he's feeling good going into the next round. You also did see Alex Ogando and Wade Van Niekerk. They progressed through the rounds. Alex Ogando won the first heat in 20.10. Wade Van Niekerk 20.19. I spoke to Wade Van Niekerk afterwards. He was speaking about how injuries and shifting his focus is a reason that he's really dialing in on the 200 last year at the Olympics and this year. Apologies, walking is hot in Tokyo, y'all. But yeah, so he's focused on the 200, and he was speaking about the rise and the development of African sprinting as on a whole, you know, when we're talking about the 200, the 400, 100, all of that. So that'll be interesting to kind of keep an eye out for. But shout out to Wade Van Niekerk. Who else? We had Letsila Teboho. He kind of like comfortably won his heat. He was relaxed. He was chilling, like nothing too crazy. He was kind of having fun at the end of his race. I mean, it'll be interesting because he false started in the 100 meters, and now he's coming into the 200. False started in the 100-meter final. There was speculation, or I don't know, like lore that he potentially was like, oh, let me save myself a little bit, you know, for the 200. I don't know how true that is. I think maybe he just made a mistake, and now he's locked in with the 200. Again, looking on the surface, the other two that I do want to shout out, Carly Makarawu from Zimbabwe. He was able to run 19.91. He also felt very comfortable. Check out that interview that I did with him afterwards. He's been having a very long NCAA season, but he is ready to make sure he can translate his performances throughout the entire year to get to the World Championship final and to potentially get on the podium. Remember, he finished 6th place at the Olympic Games last year. He's looking to get on the podium at the World Championships this year. I don't know if it's going to happen, but he can. Maka Charamba also made it into the final. I mean, pretty much all the big names made it into final. There's no surprises in any capacity, but very quickly, I completely forgot to mention that Gout was running. And yes, Gout competed. He qualified into the semifinals. Now, he didn't look amazing. I guess he looked fine, right? He looked pretty fine. He almost kind of faded to 3rd, but that's fine because top 3 go through into the semifinals. But you know, he looked pretty good. He finished 2nd, I think, in his heat. You also had like Courtney Lindsay qualify through. Yeah, like for the most part, I think only Joe Fombley might be the only guy who didn't qualify through. Obviously, Gout is, you know, he didn't compete against any of the top guys. Of course, he competed at the Ostrava Continental Tour against Reina Mena. Reina Mena isn't here at the World Championships, but you know, it'll be interesting to see how he does, you know, compete in the semifinals. I personally don't have many major expectations about him making the final in the 200 because, you know, like these 200s are stacked. When we looked at Alex Ogando, when you looked at Noah Lyles, Bryan Levell, Letsile, Kenny, like these guys are like chilling, they're cruising. So will Gout be able to hold his own? And it may take, you know, so I wouldn't be surprised if it took sub 20 to actually make the final. Now, or very, very low, meaning that Gout will probably have to run his best race ever to actually make the final. So we'll see how that does actually pan out. But yeah, wanted to make sure I could slip in that note about Gout. But the biggest story is Bryan Levell. And I do think the big question is, will he be able to not only replicate what he's done, this 19.84 or faster when we get to the semifinals and the final, but will he be able to manage the rounds, and will others, you know, potentially, I guess it's like, will others, you know, take a step back, or will Bryan Levell take a big step up? Because if we think that Letsila Teboho, if we think that Noah Lyles, Kenny B, if they're going to run their best, then Bryan Levell is going to have to run 19.5, right? Or 19 something faster. So that's the real question. A lot of the guys, they are thinking that Bryan has the capabilities, of course, of going faster, but also that some other guys might get a little rattled, right? They might get a little more into their heads, might get a little scared, especially as those big three have, you know, they've doubled, right? So they're not coming on fresh legs. But I'm not sure. It'll be interesting to see how they actually do translate. I also do think we should keep an eye out for some of the other athletes like Alex Ogando, like, you know, Carly Makarawu. I think those guys really do have outside shots to make a surprise if someone does slip up, right? Whether that is the big three or whether that is Bryan Levell. We saw something in the works, like, you know, Julian Alfred. She slipped up and Tina Clayton took advantage, had the race of her life, and got that silver medal in the 100. Could we see something like this where, again, whether the big three slips up, which opens the door for Bryan Levell, or someone that we're not actually thinking about, like in Alex Ogando, like Akali Makarawu, Maka Charamba, those are some guys that I don't think we have true eyes on and can actually spoil the party. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens. So, men's 200, exciting. We got the semifinals coming up tomorrow, and then we got the finals coming up on the day after. This is heating up, y'all. We're getting to the second half of the World Championships. Man, the 200s, they're stacked. So let me know what you think. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel. Truly do appreciate y'all. Thanks for watching.